Imagine a son so blinded by wealth that he forgot where he came from. This is the story of Chief Nkemjika, a billionaire who returned home with gold in his pockets, but emptiness in his heart. What happened when he refused to honor his father's burial will leave you speechless. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe and give this story a thumbs up. The dust rose like smoke as 3 black SUVs rolled into a Bodonta village. Children ran alongside, shouting with excitement. Women ululated. Men beat drums of welcome. But when Chief Nkemjika stepped out, dressed in a designer agbada that shimmered like water under sunlight, his face remained cold as stone. The village elders approached, bowing respectfully. "Welcome home, our son. Your father's spirit rejoices to see you." Nkemjika waved his hand dismissively. "Let's make this quick. I have meetings in Abuja tomorrow." The eldest among them, Papa Okoro, smiled gently despite the insult. "Your father waited long for this day. Then he can wait a little longer," Nkemjika replied, checking his gold wristwatch. The crowd fell silent. Even the drums stopped beating. An old blind woman sitting under the Irako tree whispered loud enough for all to hear. "He has come home with gold but no heart." Inside his father's compound, the air was thick with grief and incense. Women wept softly in corners. Men spoke in hushed tones. The body of Nkemjika's father lay on a mat, dressed in simple white cloth, his face peaceful as though sleeping. Nkemjika stood over the body without shedding a single tear. His wife touched his arm gently. "Will you not say goodbye?" He pulled away. "I need to make calls." Papa Okoro stepped forward. "Chief, we must begin preparations for the traditional rites. Your father must be sent off properly, according to our customs." Nkemjika's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Traditional rites? Dancing and drums? No, my father deserves better than village nonsense. I'm importing a coffin from Italy. Marble and gold. That's what a man of his stature deserves." The elders exchanged worried glances. Papa Okoro spoke carefully. "My son, some things are bigger than money. If the earth is not fed properly, it will spit back what you try to hide." "Superstition," Nkemjika muttered, walking away. That night, as everyone slept, a strong wind swept through the compound. In the morning, they found the father's portrait fallen from the wall, cracked cleanly down the middle. Within 3 days, the burial site was transformed. Bulldozers cleared the ancestral ground. Workers poured concrete. Engineers installed lighting systems. And rising from the red earth was a structure the village had never seen. A glass tomb, tall and gleaming, with LED lights running along its edges like captured lightning. Nkemjika invited television crews and newspaper reporters. "This is how a modern man honors his father," he announced to the cameras. "Not with primitive rituals, but with excellence." The villagers gathered at a distance, whispering among themselves. "This is an abomination," one woman said. "The ancestors will not accept this. His father's spirit will wander forever," another added. Papa Okoro tried one last time. "Chief, please. At least pour libation. At least perform the small rites." Nkemjika counted out crisp naira notes and handed them over. "Buy yourselves drinks. Celebrate however you want. But don't bother me with outdated traditions." During the burial ceremony, as Nkemjika gave his speech about progress and modernity, thunder suddenly rolled across the sky. Yet there were no clouds. The audience looked up confused. One cameraman reviewing his footage later would swear he captured a shadow moving behind the glass tomb where no one stood. That night, Nkemjika's mansion stood silent under the stars. His wife, Adiz, fed their infant son and placed him gently in the crib. She was about to turn off the light when she heard it. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the bedroom door. "Who is it?" she called out. No answer. She opened the door. The hallway stretched empty and dark. Her heart began to race. She closed the door and locked it. Then the knocking came again. 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. From the same door she just locked. "Nkem!" she screamed for her husband. He rushed in from his study. "What's wrong?" Before she could answer, their baby began crying. Not the usual infant cry, but a wail of terror that chilled their blood. The sound seemed to echo through the entire house. Nkemjika picked up his son, rocking him desperately. Nothing worked. The child's face turned red, his little fists clenched tight. Then Adiz remembered. She ran to the living room and brought back the framed photograph of Nkemjika's father. The moment she placed it beside the crib, the baby stopped crying. The silence that followed was somehow more frightening than the noise. Morning came with news that made Nkemjika's blood run cold. His farmland, over 50 acres of rich, fertile soil that had fed the village for generations, had turned completely yellow overnight. The yam vines hung limp and lifeless. The cassava plants looked like they'd been poisoned. Even the mighty palm trees drooped as though mourning. Nkemjika drove to the farm in his Range Rover, his manager beside him. They walked through rows of dying crops, speechless. "Sir, I don't understand," the manager stammered. "Yesterday, everything was healthy. We checked the irrigation. The soil was perfect. This is impossible." But under the old Irako tree at the far edge of the farm, one small patch remained bright green, almost glowing with life. Abil, the old gravedigger who maintained the land, was standing there with his hoe. His clothes were patched and worn, his feet bare and dusty. "Do you see this?" Abil said quietly, pointing at the green patch. "This is where your father poured libations every market day. This is the only ground that remembers him." Nkemjika's face darkened with anger. "Old man, what have you done to my farm? Did you poison my crops?" Before Abil could answer, a bird fell from the clear sky and landed with a soft thud on the hood of Nkemjika's car. It was still warm, still dead. The village square filled with people as the moon rose high and full. The elders had sent word. Chief Nkemjika must come to the sacred meeting. This was not a request. They sat in a semicircle, 7 old men and women whose combined age stretched back over 5 centuries of village history. Papa Okoro held his wooden staff, carved with symbols older than memory. Nkemjika arrived late, his phone still pressed to his ear. He ended the call and sat down impatiently. "Make this quick." Papa Okoro's voice was gentle but firm. "My son, strange things are happening. Your father's spirit is restless. You must perform the cleansing rites, the Irund. Only this can bring peace." Nkemjika laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet night. "You people and your superstitions. Here." He pulled out his checkbook. "I'll write you a check. Buy goats for your ceremonies. Buy whatever you need. But leave me out of your primitive beliefs." The eldest priestess, Mama Nwanioma, rose to her feet, her white wrapper glowing in the firelight. Her voice cracked like thunder. "You cannot buy what your pride has broken. You mock the very ground that holds your ancestors' bones." She slammed her staff into the earth 3 times. "Then your wealth shall feed the earth until the earth rejects it." The elders stood and walked away, leaving Nkemjika alone in the square, surrounded by shadows that seemed to move closer. The rain came that night like an army, pounding against Nkemjika's mansion with furious intensity. But what happened next defied all logic. Despite the house being built on the highest ground in the area, water began seeping through the walls, then pouring, then flooding. "Get upstairs," Nkemjika shouted, grabbing his wife and son. The family rushed to the 2nd floor as water filled the ground level, destroying furniture, electronics, and priceless artwork. Adiz sobbed, clutching their baby. Nkemjika stood at the window, watching his possessions float and sink below. And then he saw it. In the reflection of the dark water that covered his marble floor, a face stared back at him. Not his own face, his father's face. The eyes were open, looking directly at him, lips moving as though speaking words he could not hear. He stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. "What is it?" Adiz cried. He couldn't answer. His mouth had forgotten how to form words. By morning, the water had drained away as mysteriously as it came. The damage was extensive, but something far worse waited for them. Their baby son lay in his crib, breathing but unresponsive. His eyes open but seeing nothing. His tiny chest rising and falling, but no other movement at all. The private hospital in Lagos gleamed with chrome and glass, machines beeping softly in climate-controlled rooms. But for all its modern medicine, no doctor could explain what was wrong with Nkemjika's son. His vitals are stable, the lead doctor said, checking charts. But he's in some kind of catatonic state. We've run every test. Brain activity is normal. There's no infection, no disease, no injury. Medically, there's no reason for this condition. Nkemjika sat beside the small hospital bed, holding his son's limp hand. His wife had cried herself to exhaustion and now slept in the chair beside him. That night, alone in the dim room with only the sound of machines and his own ragged breathing, Nkemjika finally broke. Tears streamed down his face. He pressed his forehead against his son's tiny hand. He fell in a fitful sleep and dreamed. In the dream, his father sat across from him in the old village compound. Not angry, just sad. "You buried pride, not a man," his father said. "You gave me glass when I needed earth. You gave me lights when I needed love." Nkemjika woke with a gasp. Dawn light filtered through the hospital blinds. He looked down at his hands. They were covered in red clay, the same clay from his father's compound, dry and crumbling between his fingers. The road back to Obodonta was long and wet. Rain had fallen the night before, leaving the path muddy and difficult. Nkemjika drove alone in a hired car, his Range Rover having broken down mysteriously the day before. He arrived unannounced. Villagers stopped their work to stare as he passed, murmuring to one another. He looked different, thinner. His expensive clothes hung loose. His eyes were hollow and red from sleepless nights. At the gate of his father's compound, Abiel stood waiting, shovel in one hand, as though he'd known Nkemjika would come. "You have returned," Abiel said simply. "My son is dying," Nkemjika whispered. "The doctors can't help him. I don't know what to do." Abiel's weathered face showed neither judgment nor satisfaction. Only truth. "You can't fight what's buried wrong. The earth remembers. Your father remembers. Then tell me how to fix it," Nkemjika pleaded. "Tell me what I must do." Abiel walked toward the burial site, motioning for Nkemjika to follow. They stood before the glass tomb, now looking less magnificent than it had weeks ago. Spider webs stretched across corners. Dirt smudged the gleaming surface. Abiel pointed at the base. "Look," Nkemjika bent down and saw it. A crack, running from bottom to top, splitting the entire structure. And the crack was growing, spreading like veins across the glass. "It opened on its own," Abiel said quietly. 3 nights ago. Midnight found them back at the burial site. Abiel insisted they wait for this hour, when the veil between worlds grew thin. Nkemjika's wife had refused to come, too frightened by everything that had happened. But Nkemjika had no choice left. His son's life hung by a thread. The glass tomb stood before them, and as they approached, it began to glow faintly from within. Not from the LED lights, which had been disconnected. This was a different light, cold and pale like moonlight trapped underwater. "Do you see it?" Abiel whispered. Nkemjika stepped closer, his breath fogging the glass. And then his heart nearly stopped. Inside the tomb, something moved. A hand, wrinkled and ancient, pressed against the glass from within. The fingers spread slowly, deliberately. "Papa!" Nkemjika's voice broke. Behind him, his wife screamed. She had followed, after all, unable to let him face this alone. Now she stood frozen, pointing at the tomb. Abiel began chanting in the old language, words that had been passed down for 1,000 years. The ground beneath them trembled. The crack in the glass widened. And then, with a sound like 1,000 mirrors breaking at once, the tomb exploded outward. Glass shards flew into the night, catching moonlight as they fell. In the settling dust, a voice whispered on the wind, unmistakably his father's voice. "You have buried the living spirit of your lineage." They gathered in the father's old hut, the same place where Nkemjika had been born 42 years ago. An oil lamp flickered on the small wooden table, casting dancing shadows on the mud walls. Adi sat close to her husband, both of them trembling from what they'd witnessed. Abiel sat across from them, his old eyes reflecting the lamplight. He was silent for a long time, as though gathering courage to speak. "There is something you must know," he finally said. "Something your father made me promise never to tell you, unless death came knocking." Nkemjika leaned forward. "Tell me everything." 30 years ago, Abiel began, this village faced a terrible famine. The rains refused to fall. Crops died. Children starved. Your father, who was the wisest among us, went into the forest for 3 days to seek the ancestors' guidance. He paused, pain crossing his weathered face. When he returned, the rains came. The land flourished. But there was a price. Your father made a covenant with the spirits of this land. He promised that his bloodline would prosper, but only if his burial honored the old ways. Only if his children remembered where they came from. Nkemjika felt ice spreading through his chest. And he told me this? He wrote it in a letter. Abiel said. He gave it to the elders to present to you when he died. Adiz gasped. The sealed envelope. The one you burned without reading. Nkemjika remembered. The envelope that Papa Okoro had tried to give him. He tossed it into the fire, saying, I don't need my father's final lectures. Dawn broke cold and gray over Obodona. Nkemjika stood at the edge of the graveyard, stripped of his fine clothes, wearing only simple wrapper cloth. In his hands, he held a wooden shovel, the kind his father had used to work the fields. You must dig with your own hands, Abiel had told him. You must undo what pride has sealed. Nkemjika drove the shovel into the earth. His palms, soft from years of air-conditioned offices and leather car seats, split open almost immediately. Blood mixed with soil. He kept digging. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. His muscles screamed with pain. But with each shovel of dirt, memories flooded back. His father teaching him to plant yams. His father's laugh when he'd fallen into the river. His father's gentle hand correcting him when he made mistakes. I'm sorry, Papa, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed, striking near the Irako tree. Rain began to fall, mixing with his tears and sweat. He dug deeper, deeper, until finally his shovel struck wood. The coffin, his hands trembling. He cleared away the remaining soil and reached for the lid. It burst open before he could touch it, the wood splintering outward with impossible force. Nkemjika stared into the coffin, his mind struggling to process what he saw. The coffin was empty. The body was gone. Come, Abiel said, appearing beside him as though he'd been there all along. It's not finished yet. He led Nkemjika through the rain, past the compound, into the forest behind the village. They walked a path Nkemjika remembered from childhood, though it seemed narrower now, overgrown with vines and ferns. They emerged at the sacred Irako tree, the ancient giant that stood at the spiritual heart of the village. And there, seated at its base, covered in roots and red clay as though the earth itself was claiming him, was Nkemjika's father. His eyes were open but distant, looking at something beyond this world. His chest moved with breath, yet he seemed more statue than man. The tree roots had grown around him, holding him in an embrace that was both tender and terrible. Papa, Nkemjika whispered, falling to his knees. His father's eyes slowly focused on him. When he spoke, his voice echoed as though coming from deep underground. You buried my body in pride, but my soul in chains. The glass that honored no one. The gold that fed nothing. The lights that blinded you to truth. Nkemjika crawled forward through the mud, reaching for his father's clay-covered hand. Tell me how to free you. Please. Free me by feeding the earth yourself, his father said. Give back what was taken. Return me to the soil that gave me life. His form began to fade, becoming translucent, the tree roots showing through his body like he was made of morning mist. The sun rose over the riverbank, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The entire village gathered at the ancestral burial ground, the true sacred place that Nkemjika had ignored in his pride. He carried his father's bones himself, wrapped in simple white cloth. No golden coffin, no marble tomb, no cameras or journalists. Just the sun, the earth, and the ancestors watching from the unseen world. Papa Okoro led the rites in the old language, pouring libation as it had been done for countless generations. The village women sang the funeral songs, their voices rising and falling like waves. Nkemjika knelt in the red earth and dug the grave with his own bleeding hands. He laid his father's remains gently in the soil, then covered them, patting the earth as tenderly as though tucking a child into bed. "Rest now, Papa," he whispered. "Rest in the ground that loved you. Rest among the ancestors who wait for you. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." The moment the grave was complete, the sky cleared. Clouds parted like curtains. Sunlight poured down in golden shafts. In a hospital in Lagos, 200 miles away, a nurse checking on a catatonic infant suddenly called out in amazement. The boy's eyes had fluttered open. He was reaching for his bottle. He was alive again, truly alive. Adiz collapsed beside the crib, sobbing with relief. And in Abodonta, the villagers began to celebrate. But when Nkemjika turned to thank Abil, the old gravedigger was gone. Only his shovel remained, planted in the earth. 6 months had passed since that day. The glass tomb had been removed, its shards buried deep. In its place grew wildflowers, more beautiful than any garden money could buy. Nkemjika's mansion in the village now served as a community center. His luxury cars were sold, the money distributed to widows and orphans. He lived in his father's old compound, its mud walls repaired, its roof red-hatched with palm fronds. Every morning, he woke before dawn and walked barefoot to the farm. The land had come back to life, more fertile than anyone could remember. He worked alongside the villagers, his hands now calloused and strong, his back bent to the same labor his father had loved. His son, healthy and laughing, played in the compound with other village children. Adiz, who had feared this simple life at first, now smiled more than she ever had in their mansion. A visiting journalist once asked Nkemjika what had changed him so completely. He looked at the red soil under his fingernails and said, "Gold can build tombs, but only dust remembers love. I learned that a man who forgets his roots digs his own grave, but humility can dig him out again." As he spoke, a young boy playing nearby found a piece of glass half buried in the dirt, a shard from the destroyed tomb. It glowed faintly in his small hand, pulsing with strange light. Then, as everyone watched, it faded to clear, ordinary glass and crumbled to dust. The curse was finally broken. The lesson was complete.